Today's presentation is about what happens when you get into a new position. And I have a PowerPoint presented for this today, but before going into it, I want to go over a few points that aren't necessarily covered in the PowerPoint. So we'll kind of start with those, and then I will go to the PowerPoint. And now this particular topic is actually, a very important one, because what happens to a lot of attorneys is when you're joining a new firm, one of the ways to think about it, and everybody joins a new firm at some point, is that when you're interviewing with the firm, it's sort of like when you start out, if you're dating someone. And so, what you would do on an initial date is you wouldn't talk about the negative aspects of kind of yourself, and also your other date wouldn't talk about negative aspects of themselves. And then sometimes the more you get to know people, the more issues that they're going to be. And so you need to think about, what are the issues that are going to come up, once you start, once you start getting to know the firm. So there's always going to be issues that are going to come up, and things are not always going to be as great as they seem when you're interviewing, but things may be better, but the odds are that there's going to be issues once you join. So you always need to be prepared for that. And you need to come in with the idea that you're going to try to make things work. So you're going to come in and you're probably going to find some things that you don't like about the firm once you join. And that happens kind of everywhere. And then you'll also find things that will work. Now, when you do join a new firm, the people that have hired you are excited for you to join. If there's associates there and they know that someone's joining, they're also going to be excited for you to join. And so it's going to, generally when you join a new firm, when you get there, it's nice. You come in and you typically will have a good experience, and people will welcome you, or they may not. And you may have to figure out kind of what that culture is like. But the big thing to understand when you do join a new firm, and this is just a very important point that I just want to make very clear, from the start, is you're there to make them money. And if you're an associate, you're there to bill hours. If you're a partner, you're there to hopefully bill hours and then hopefully bring business. And so your only objective there is really, when you come in, is to think about you're there to make the firm money. And so just kind of keeping that in the background is always something that's very important. You're not there to make friends necessarily at the start. You're there to figure out how the firm, to make the firm money, and then also how to make the firm money. How does the firm expect you to make them money? And so making money for a firm can mean a lot of different things, but generally it's about being someone that's easy to make money from. So being easy to make money from means when you start getting initial assignments, you're doing them as well as it possibly can be done, that they don't require a lot of input from the firm. It means being easy to work with. It means making the people you're working with comfortable. And it also means being on the side of good. And so what does being on the side of good mean? Being on the side of good means that in any firm that you go into, there's going to be people that are unhappy, and there's going to be people that are happy. And so you need to figure out right away, how to get on the side of the people that are happy with the firm. Because if you go in initially and you start getting on the side of people that are unhappy with the firm, you're always going to experience problems. So any firm is looking at you initially to see what kind of group are you joining, because there's always going to be people there that are unhappy. The law firm knows who's unhappy, and many times the first people that you meet when you go into a firm are going to be the people that are unhappy. They will often seek you out and try to kind of bring you over into their way of thinking. So you need to be very, very careful anytime you go into a new firm of being on the side of people that may not be happy with the firm. Yeah, so your objective right when you get in is to understand how to make the firm money and to be on the side of good. And being on the side of good means that when you're working with people, you want to be on the side of the people that are basically for the firm. So you need to seek those people out, and you need to avoid people that have any form of negativity towards the firm. You just need to do that immediately. And then if you do come across those people, you need to be friendly, but not necessarily get on the side of them. The other important thing to understand is the second you get into a new firm, you're establishing a brand. And so what that means when you're establishing a brand is people are going to look at you based on the quality of your initial work, based on how hard you work, based on the quality of work that you do and all these sorts of different things. So when you come into a new firm, your objective really is you need to work as hard as possible. You need to do the best job you possibly can, and you need to be on the side of the right people. So those are some of the most important messages I can give you. I'll go into kind of the meat and bones of this webinar right now, but just remembering that the only way to survive when you go into a new firm is to really make sure that you're on the side of the people that are enthusiastic about the firm. And then in addition to that, that you're really establishing a brand very quickly, which means you're working hard, which means that you're not making mistakes on assignments, means that you're figuring out what to do and how to do it very, very well. And the reason I bring up these points initially is I see multiple people go into new firms and experience issues right away. And generally those issues are because they either piss people off initially, or they make the mistake of not really applying themselves as much as they can when they start, not doing the best work they possibly can, and often bringing in bad habits from their other firm. So if you're there to make a firm money, that means you work as hard as you can. You make it easy for the firm to make money from you, meaning you do the absolute best work you possibly can. You don't create problems, and then you just realize that that's the only reason that you're there. Now, one of the things to understand about every firm is not necessarily a meritocracy. So you will not, people will get ahead in other things from, not necessarily understanding that point. And so you need to come in every firm and you need to learn kind of the culture of the organization. And the culture of the organization is something that you can often pick up in interviews, but you also need to make sure that you understand the culture. The culture often means the positive and negative things about it. So, what makes you get the best work? How do you do that? There's often rules and so forth to make you very good that you can understand. So, when people talk about fit, there's a lot about it, but it's also being comfortable with the culture. The culture is very, very important because I've seen a lot of attorneys enter firms and then have issues there because they don't necessarily, connect with the culture when they get there. And the culture, could be a lot of different things. So, it's very important to understand. So if you don't integrate with the culture right away, there can be a lot of problems. So you need to understand what the culture is, how to fit into that, and how to be comfortable. Because if you're not, you could be, you may not do well. Okay, so this is just a couple of analogies, but it's about science. When there's different forms of science, but there's quantum physics, for example. There's a certain set of rules in terms of the way things work, and it's the same thing with firms. There's a certain type of culture in terms of the way that partners interact with associates, partners interact with one another, and you need to figure that out, pretty quickly once you get in there. There's different ways that offices work, so you'll need to understand when you come in there immediately and be very cautious. You don't want to necessarily, try to figure out, connect with people too deeply. When you start, when you come in, people are going to be very interested in you, and they will often seek you out. People will try to be your friend immediately. Some of those people, like I talked about initially, that will try to make friends with you. Often the people that try to make friends with you initially are the people that are unhappy. And so they can often, influence you in a negative way. And it's important when you go into any organization, there's people that always will think highly of the organization, and there's people that will think negatively, but there's people that will want to advance in the organization, and there's people that are looking for other jobs. And so the people that seek you out initially when you join almost any firm, and the people that try to make friends with you often are the people that lack that enthusiasm and may, color the way you view things. And that's one of the things to understand about firms. So all firms are basically you have to think about them as organisms. And so what they do is they attract people, and then certain people will not fit in there. Certain people will not be happy there. And if you're associating initially when you go there with the people that are unhappy, they're going to influence how you think about things. So you need to really make sure that you protect your mind when you go in there and not get on the side of the people that are unhappy. The people that are unhappy are often unhappy for reasons that may not have anything to do with the firm. They may be unhappy because they're not doing good work. They may be unhappy for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they just don't like practicing law, but you need to be very, very careful about that, because the second you start getting on the side of negativity, that will influence how people see you. That will influence the type of assignments you get, and will have all sorts of negative things that could affect your experience there. So it's something to really be very, very careful about. So the first people you meet will often be negative, and you do not want to be influenced by negative people. Now, every firm has negative things about it. Some of the firms have hours that are too long. Some of the firms have partners that are unpleasant to work with. Some of the firms may not do as sophisticated of work as you want. So the second you go into a new firm, you will start learning often about all of these negative things, because no firm is perfect. And there's large firms where this is going on all the time, and there's small law firms where this is going on all the time. So your goal really when you come in is to be on the side of people that are actually positive towards the firm, and then to try to avoid the people that are negative. I see people all the time go into new firms, and they start hearing all sorts of negative things, and then they get unhappy with the job. And when they get unhappy with the job, they stop doing good work. When they stop doing good work, they're often let go very quickly, or they're just unhappy in the job. And you have to realize that when you go into a job, you really need to find like the positive aspects of the job, the positive aspects of the people, and realize that it's an opportunity to be someone that's positive. And if you are positive and you do connect with the right people, you're going to do well. The people that first reach out to you often in the firms are not the people that have the most power. Often you may not be working for the most important partners when you get there. You may be, have all sorts of things. You may be approached initially by people that are unhappy, and those people you need to be, very, very careful. You have to be very careful about forming relationships with people and being friends with them when you first get there, because you may not again be aware of who that person is, what kind of problems that they may be experiencing, and all sorts of things. So you need to look at them. Are these the people that are busiest? Are these the people that are doing the best, and so forth like that. So these people, the first people to approach you will often be the people that are problematic. So you need to be very careful about forming initial relationships. You need to start learning when you get to a new firm, like who are the people that are the most respected, who are the people that are doing the best, who are the associates that are doing the best, and really do your best to gravitate towards them. I had an interesting experience when I was a summer associate at a firm. It was in New York, and when I got there was like maybe, I don't know, 12 or 13 other summer associates, and they all just kind of started, they would come into work around 10, they would leave around 6 or 6:30, and that was kind of what everyone was doing there. The middle of the summer, everybody that was doing that got very, very bad reviews. They basically were told they weren't going to get offers, and there was one woman there that had a friend that was also at the firm, and that friend told her that you need to absolutely work as hard as you possibly can and do the best. And I learned from that, and this woman and I were the only ones that got offers, and it was all because of kind of gravitating towards, so that she gravitated towards an associate that was doing very, very well. Then I also learned from her. So you try to figure out who's doing well and who's not doing the best. People that make friends at work, you need to understand also that making friends is something you need to be very careful about. When you make friends, friends will know negative information about you, and you should assume that any information that you share with anybody that's personal in nature people will talk about it. They will talk about if you have different sorts of problems. They will talk about pretty much anything that you share with them that's negative. You should assume that everybody is going to know about it, and they will. So you need to be very, very careful, and you also need to be very careful about who you've associated with. Everybody will have developed a certain persona when they come to a firm. So certain people will be thought of as hard workers, certain people will be thought of as not doing the best work, and other people will be thought of in different ways. So you have to realize that when you come to a new firm, you're developing a brand right away. One of the questions that I tell people to ask when they go into interviews is, what would I need to do in the first 30, 60, 90 days to be, the absolute best, associate or the very best at my job. And you need to think about that way. Like, what do you need to do during the first 30, 60, 90 days to be, the best at your job? And, you need to keep your private life out of it. You need to establish a brand as someone that's doing the best possible work, that's not letting the personal life bleed into the firm. And you need to really understand, to the extent that you can be yourself. So just the big thing to understand is that when you go into a new firm, you're actually a product. And by product, I mean that you've been hired to bill hours and make the firm money. Anything that comes outside of that is, you need to be very careful of. So what is a good product? A good product is something that does what it's supposed to, meaning it earns money, it does the work in the way it's supposed to, and then it doesn't create extra problems. So the idea, if you buy a car and the car functions well, but then it starts blowing its horn at random times, that would be a bad product. If you bought a car, an electric car, and it said it had a range of 300 miles and it only went 200 miles, then that would be a bad product. So you need to understand, what do you need to do to be a good product. And being a good product essentially means that you're there to bill hours and you're there to do it in the way that is best suited to what that product is supposed to do. And if you're an associate, your only job to think about is you're there to bill hours. You're there to do it as easily as possible. You're there to do the work that you should be doing. So always think about a product. Like, a product means like a car. Like, what does a car need to do to function well? Does a car need to, if it's creating problems while you're driving it, if it's creating problems when you're starting it, if it's angry when you're starting it, if it clunks out, all those sorts of things. Like, what do you need to do to be the best product possible? And that's one of the biggest things to understand about your legal career, is that you're always going to be a product. Now, people will also have a lot of opinions. And so they'll have opinions about politics. They'll have opinions about, all sorts of things. And your job really is to more listen than have opinions. The smartest people are often the best listeners. And I've noticed that throughout my career. The people that do the best, the people that go the farthest, are often the best listeners, because when you listen to things, you can understand what you need to avoid and what you need to do the best are. So, listen to what people say. Also, when, they're, telling you things, you should observe interactions. So you should see, how different people, interact with a firm, how different types of personalities. You should watch how partners treat other associates. You should watch how the people that are doing well are doing. You should watch all of this, and you should be very, very careful. I mean, if someone likes to tell dirty jokes, you should not be telling dirty jokes in response. If you can see different aspects of the culture, like how they treat people. You need to watch that very, very closely. And you just need to be, very, very careful. Like, you have to watch interactions. You have to watch how people behave during meetings. You have to watch all of this thing. A lot of things. A lot of people in firms will go out to drinks. Some people will, naturally drink a lot. Others won't. You need to be careful there. You need to kind of watch, that sort of information as well. It's good if you have hobbies and things to often, get involved with people. So different law firms may have softball teams and things like that. That's okay. Sometimes, you can, participate in different hobbies with people. That's a good way to bond with people. It's always important to try to get some sort of informal, outside of the office interaction with people. Every firm is built on relationships and internal relationships. So to the extent you can involve yourself in different things with firms, whether it's like a running group or softball and things, that's always a good idea. If you can do that, when you get close to partners, sometimes people will get close to partners in different firms, that's very, very good. You can often get a lot of information that will help you. It will help you understand who to avoid and all sorts of things. So I went into my first law firm, and I actually ended up getting very close to a partner that became my friend. And when I got close to him, he started sharing information with me about partners that were on the way out that helped me avoid them, different associates, like things that he knew about them that were not necessarily good. And so those sorts of things help me as well. So you need to, learn, if you can, also to get close to partners. There's always going to be, different legends and things of, people, like how hard they work, people that were advanced and things based on that. So you should learn from that. Every firm's going to have positive stories. So you're going to learn about positive stories about people that did well. At the first firm I joined, there was a guy that made partner in 3 years. He was billing like 35 or 4,000 hours a year. So, that obviously was an example. You can learn from, certain types of people will be advanced. A lot of times, you'll learn, just different aspects of kind of how the firm will work. And so, certain firms, you'll go into, you'll learn very quickly about the culture as well. When you ask questions, you should ask questions, senior associates about things that you need to do well. There's often very successful, senior associates there that have done well. So you should always try to ask them questions. People that are senior to you, meaning if you're a junior associate and there's a mid-level associate there or a senior associate you're working with, you should try to get information from them about how to do well. They can tell you often partners to avoid. They can give you input and they can often help you with your work. So what that means is that if you gravitate towards the right people, they can help you with assignments. They can help you not make mistakes. And so having people that are kind of on your side and that you're seeking out for advice is also very important. You can often, talk to people that are more senior. So a lot of times in a firm, you will get sometimes they will give you like an advisor who's a partner, but when you're talking to partners, people like to talk about how they became successful and so forth. So oftentimes getting close to them and asking them those sorts of questions when you start is a good idea. You should always look towards, and I talked about this earlier, the people that are doing the best. So when you find the people that are doing the best, whether the associates, you should always try to get close to them. You can ask recruiting coordinators these questions. You can even ask secretaries that you may have these questions. You should try to figure out who's doing well and who's not doing well, because your whole goal when you join a new firm is really to get on the side and understand who do I need to be in order to do well and who do I need to avoid. And so different people will have different types of work habits. So what does that mean? So certain people may be doing very well because they're working with certain partners. Certain people may be doing very well because they're billing a lot of hours. Certain people may be doing very well because they're seen, they're in the office all the time. Certain people may be doing very well because the firm values really good writing. I mean, you just don't know. So you need to try to figure out like who's doing well in the organization and who isn't. One thing I would just, also stress to you is that when you're trying to figure out people that are doing well, it's often the people that have been there the longest. So if someone starts off as a junior associate and is now like a senior associate, there may be things that they're doing to do very well. You just don't know. So you always want to try to get close to the people that are doing the best. You need to, be very careful about things. Like I said earlier, it's important to listen. The more you listen, the more you learn. When you talk to associates, they'll tell you about people that are doing poorly, but you just need to listen as much as you possibly can. You need to watch how people are treating people that are beneath them. One of the things that's also important to understand is when you come into a new firm, a lot of the judgment about you is going to be made by legal secretaries, for example. So a legal secretary will often, they will communicate a lot of information to partners. And so if you get along very well with them, then what they'll do is they will pass along, they'll cover your mistakes and things like that. If you're talking negatively about the firm to a secretary or anybody who's in an administrative role, or you're not working hard, or you're avoiding things, you're taking very long lunches and things, that will get back to partners. So you need to be very, very careful about how you interact with secretaries. You need to be very careful about how you interact with any staff member, understanding that the staff members at any level of the firm can impact you. So word processing and docketing people, anybody that you're interacting that's a staff person, you should assume that those people are also communicating a lot of information to people that have power over you. If they see you trying to do very good work, if they see you, being very, very nice to them, they will help you. And again, you have to be nice to every single person that you're interacting with. You cannot afford to have anybody against you. And because secretaries, for example, may have been there for 20, 30 years, and they're very, very valuable to partners that they work with. The same thing with paralegals, the same thing with anybody. So if those people start sending negative information about you, that can really hurt you a lot. I had a situation where I was clerking for a federal judge, and I did not agree with his politics. I didn't share that with him, but I shared it with other people in the courthouse. And one of the people that I shared it with was a court reporter. And the court reporter had negative opinions as well. So we liked talking about this stuff. But the court reporter was also friends with the secretary to my judge. And so she would communicate to the secretary that I wasn't happy with his politics. And so it got back to him, and he didn't like me and basically, pretty much fired me. I quit before I was going to get fired because I realized I was getting fired in a meeting. But just because I was sharing negative information with a staff person, it got back. So you have to be very careful. Anytime you share negative opinions with support staff, that's going to hurt you. Anytime you treat support staff in a negative way, that's going to hurt you. So everybody in the firm is really, your eyes and ears. There's always going to be gossip. You need to be very careful about gossip. So you need to learn from the gossip, but you never want to be someone that repeats gossip. If you're the person that repeats gossip, that can affect you negatively. If you hear gossip about a partner or something, and you tell that gossip to someone else, and that someone else says that you said such and such, that can get back to you as well. So you need to be very careful about that. Every law firm, like I said earlier, and every partner that you're dealing with, they exist basically to keep people there that are kind of on the side of the organization and are not problematic and do not reflect negatively, do not make people feel badly about themselves. So anytime you start repeating gossip and things, that can hurt you as well. And there's always people that have a reputation for doing that. The people that do that are generally pushed out, and you need to be very careful about that. So you do not want people to you do not want to get involved in any type of gossip. One of the things that I always recommend when you're going into a firm, especially if you're getting work from others, is to remember that everybody you deal with that's giving you work is a client. So the partner is a client. So if you were working with a client, you would not want to say negative things about them. Attorneys that represent people do not talk negatively about their clients, because if they talk negatively about their clients like them. So they want to be very, very careful about how you treat the people that you're working with, and realize that everybody you're dealing with is a client. So just very, very careful about gossip. Just be very, very careful. You don't ever want to repeat things. You want to come around as someone that's talking positively about the firm. The more stuff you learn about things, whether you learn about mistakes that other associates have made, whether you learn about partners that will have different issues, partners can be involved in affairs and all sorts of things. You need to always keep that to yourself and not spread the information, because if you do that, you'll get in trouble. There's always different signs in the office about kind of what's acceptable. So sometimes people will have a lot of art and personal things, in the office. Other times they won't, and you need to be careful about how do you, what do you put into your office? And if you put too many things into your office, it doesn't look good. You need to, realize that, that the other thing is that, you need to always be seen as someone that's very hardworking. And being hardworking means that you need to basically be seen as one of the hardest workers when you go into any firm. If you're seen that way, you're going to, avoid a lot of problems. People that tend to lose jobs in firms, especially when they're new, are the people that aren't able to get a lot of hours. So getting a lot of hours means you're only going to get a lot of hours if you're doing good work. So you want to figure out like how you can get work. And then you want to figure out how are you getting repeat work. In every firm you go into, there will be people that are billing a lot of hours and ones that aren't. And your goal when you go into any new firm especially as an associate, is to bill as many hours as possible. One of the things that a lot of times people don't understand also when they go into firms is, kind of, what is your job, and what's good about the job, and what do you need to do to be, considered the best possible person. The best people in any job are typically going to be the people that are able to get the most hours. And your first 5 years of practice, a lot of people think that they're kind of employees, and you're not really there as an employee. You're there to learn. The more work you get, the better. And so, you need to, be careful. You need to also understand things like FaceTime. So FaceTime means like who's in the office and who goes to the office. A lot of people will want to work remotely. If you work remotely, and you have the option to do it, but you also have the option of working in the office. If the people that are giving you work are in the office, you should always try to be in the office. If you're in the office and being seen, then that's much more respected than not. And so you need to always, when you can, be in the office. My first firm, Quinn Emanuel, I couldn't believe it. People would be in the office pretty much every holiday, even like the 4th of July. And that was something, that you needed to do to be there to succeed. And, so you need to be, think about that. But most law firms will respect FaceTime. They will, want you to be there at certain times. And the more FaceTime you do in a firm, often the better. So people will typically start new jobs, and they will, they'll have the option of working remotely, and then they'll also have the option of being in the office. I had a woman not too long ago. She was an environmental attorney, and she was coming from the government where she was doing environmental work, and she was in Chicago. And she had been used to working remotely when she was working for the government for the past several years. And so when she went into this, she got a job with this new firm. I told her that, you should try to be in the office every single day. You should try to get to know the people. You need to work a lot of hours when you start. You need to create a really good brand for yourself very, very quickly. You need to figure out, who you can get work from, who you can get repeat work from. You need to develop relationships with the new people. Because she'd been in the government for so long, it was a big placement too. I think the company would have made, I don't know, $100,000 from the placement. I told her all this information, and then she ended up calling me back the next day and saying that she told the firm she didn't want to work there anymore because of what I told her. And she felt like it was too much, and she would prefer to keep a salary at half of what she was making. But those are the kind of things, that you need to do. Some law firms will allow you to work remotely as long as you work a lot of hours, and they'll often, value just the quality of work you do. And sometimes I've seen attorneys that will get up at like noon, but they'll work till like 3 or 4 in the morning every day, and which is insane. But people will, accept that. So often too, when you get into firms, like you'll see that partners will arrive at a certain time. So when I was working for people inside of law firms, I would always make an effort to be there before they started, and then I would always make an effort to be there until they left. And I did that in every single job that I had when I was working for people. You should, that's a sign of respect when you're working in a new place. So if you're working for people and they're coming to the office, your goal really is to be there, before they start, and then to be there after they leave. That sends a very strong message to the people you're working for, and they like it. And so, you need to be, very, very careful and aware of that as well. So, and then, again, when you're working for anybody, you should, like I said earlier, you should try to be there when they start, and then also be there after they left. And I talked a little bit earlier about the best associate. So the people that are getting the most work, you have to watch also their work habits and how they're working and the hours that they're putting in. If you're working in a firm where everybody is in the office and people are there on the weekends, then you need to do the same thing. So when I was at Quinn Emanuel, everybody would come into the office on Sundays. They would all come in around 11 to 12, and they'd always work till like 8 or 9 or 10 at night. That was just the culture of it. And if you didn't do that, that would be noticed by people and it wasn't good. So you need to watch the hours and things that people are working, and always try to work a little bit longer than other people. If you're working for senior associates, you often want to do the same thing. So, why is this important? It's important because that's the culture of wherever you're working. If you don't like it, then you can certainly work someplace for a period of time and then leave. But that's just, very, very important. FaceTime is something that a lot of people don't think about. They don't make an issue of it, but it can end up hurting you. If people are working on the weekends, again, same thing. You need to be careful about that. People are working through lunch and ordering lunch out. You need to be careful about that, and just be very, very careful about being there. When other people are. Same thing about just coming to the office at the certain times that people do. It's generally, like I said, better to be there when people are not. The other thing that's important to think about also is that there often is, in some firms, there's not a lot of supervision. You may think that people are coming and going at different times, but you need to kind of discipline yourself, because you will be seen as a brand. And the brand means, even if other people around you, other associates, don't look like they're committed and working different hours, people will catch on to that. Secretaries will catch on to that. People that you're working for, will also catch on to that. And then, so how to be visible, you need to be visible at all times. You need to be checking your email. You need to be reachable, and you need to pretty much be doing that through the weekends and pretty much all the time. People do not like this when I tell them this, but people can get in a lot of trouble. When I was at Quinn Emanuel, and I like to use this example because this firm just took hours and so forth very seriously, but there was a senior associate that flew down to, I think it was Orlando for a deposition, and he got to Orlando like maybe 2 p.m, and his deposition wasn't until the next day. He went to Disneyland for a few hours, and while he was in Disneyland, he didn't have a cell phone with him, or his cell phone was off, and a partner was trying to call him about something, and the partner got very, very upset. And he said an attorney always needs to be reachable. And as someone that's working for someone, and the firm again is your client, you need to be reachable all the time. And I hate to say that, but that's something that's very important. People want to see that you're responding to emails. People want to see that you're available. And if you're not, then, you're going to be in trouble. And so you always need to make sure you're available. So these are just some of the kind of main things about when you join a new firm. The biggest thing I can tell you is you need to learn the culture. You need to avoid the wrong people. You need to learn who's successful and who's not. You need to make sure that you're just showing and being there when other people are. You need to develop a reputation of doing very, very good work. A lot of times, when you come to a new firm, you may not understand what is good work there. And so good work at some firms can be handling a lot of matters at the same time, maybe not doing the best, doing the best work product. Sometimes if it's like insurance defense, for example, you may be evaluated more on the number of things you handle based on the quality of work. But most places, they're going to be evaluated very, very quickly based on the quality of work you do. So that means when you do turn in assignments, they need to be perfect, meaning if you're doing memos, they should not have any errors in them. If you're doing a transaction, you need to go over it very, very carefully and make sure that you're not making mistakes. Because if people make mistakes early on, they get that sort of reputation. If people are on the side of negativity and not positivity, they get that reputation. People aren't billing the hours they need to and being seen, they get that reputation. So you need to watch all of this. You need to figure out who to model, who's doing well, and then you need to kind of go with that. Your goal is, when you come into any firm, is to really be seen very, very quickly as the best possible representation of their brand, meaning you're doing the best work, you're on the side of positivity, not negativity, you're getting people to give you repeat work, and you're doing the absolute best you possibly can. So we'll take a short break now, just for like a minute or two. And then when we come back, I'll answer questions. This is a live webinar, so I will basically stay until I've answered everyone's questions. I love questions at the end of webinars. It's actually one of my favorite times of the week, because I get to learn about the things that are important to people. This webinar, by the way, is a very important webinar for you to learn, because so many people go into new firms and make so many mistakes when they get there. You cannot involve your personal life, you cannot get involved in gossip, and all of these kind of things that I covered. Just one of them can really just hugely, impact you the course of your career. Your goal when you go into any place is to think about, do I look like someone who could spend the rest of my career here? Do I look like someone that's advancing? Am I being well received? Am I learning how to navigate politics and all this sorts of stuff? A lot of times what happens too is I see resumes of people that will move firms. They'll move like every year or every, and they'll do this consistently, or they'll move like every 2 years. And a lot of times the reason that's happening is there's multiple reasons for it, but one of the reasons is they start getting on the side of negativity and they think about everything that's wrong with the firm, and they kind of just get into that mindset. I like to tell the story that when BCG started, two of my first recruiters, one of them had been in her previous job for 16 years, and the other had been in her previous job for 8 years. And those people that had been at their firms that long, they stayed at BCG that long as well. One stayed for 12 years. I think the other was at her firm for 18 years. And during that time, I would estimate that probably 100 recruiters came and went. They got involved in negative rumors about the company. They decided to side with people that were negative and not positive, and got unhappy. And even if they were making a lot of money and doing very well financially, they still kind of got on that side of negativity and found things wrong with their employer. And you're always going to find things wrong with any employer. Every employer has problems. And so, are you going to make something of that, or are you just going to kind of put your head down and work hard? And the people that put their head down and work hard and don't get involved in the negativity tend to stay around a long time. Other people go to new firms and they have problems. They don't do good work, or their work quality is not up to what it should be, or their hours aren't there, or their face time isn't there. I see people lose jobs all the time because they're not putting enough face time in. I see people bounce around between firms because they never learn from the mistakes they're making, and that hurts them. I see people getting on the wrong side of gossip, and because of that they get pushed out. So there's all these things that can happen very, very quickly when you go into a new firm and when you start, and you just need to realize that you're a product. Are you a good product? Are you doing what's expected of you and doing it even better? So if Porsche, for example, will build a car and they'll say the car goes 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. But when someone like Motor Trend or something goes and does a test, they'll say, wait a minute, this car does it in 2.6 seconds. So, they under promise and over deliver. And so are you someone that's even better than they could have imagined? And are you developing or giving more value than they could even imagine? How are you understanding the politics and so forth of where you're going? I had one guy that went into a firm, and he graduated from the University of Chicago Law School, and he did exceptionally well there. He was something like one of the top 5 students of his class. And he went to the Washington, D.C. office of a very good New York law firm. And there was a young partner there that got this new client, and he told the new client that he was going to do all this work, and something where he was going to bill $100,000 at least on doing some sort of big research project. And associate was asked to do the research project and to spend all this time on it. And then he came back and said, after a day or something, that I found the solution. There's no reason to do all this work. And the partner said, well, go ahead and do it anyway. And he said, this is unethical and so forth, and made an issue out of it, and got forced out, very, very quickly. People that, come in and are on the side of negativity of the firm and get on that side will often be pushed out very quickly. People that aren't working, the hours. I've seen people that were expected to be there at certain times and then they wouldn't. They get quite pushed out very quickly. So all these things happen when people go into new firms, and a lot of people, will fail. I knew another guy that he bounces around. He's a partner. He bounces around between firms too much. And what happens to him is he tends to go to social events and go out to drinks and stuff with people. But when he goes out to drinks, he has like 5 or 6. And so he very quickly gets the reputation as an alcoholic. And so all these things involving your personal life and so forth at a new firm can hurt you quite a bit. I saw one woman that I know very well that was working for a partner in a large firm, and the partner she would go into this woman's office, and the partner would talk about her dating life and all these things were going on. And then one day, this woman decided to talk about her dating life as well, and she talked about how she met this guy and they spent all weekend having sex, and she hardly knew him. And when she told that to the partner immediately started, didn't like her and started pushing her out and pretty much destroyed her legal career because she was so young and never found another job again. So people make all these sorts of mistakes, and you have to be very careful anytime you go into a new firm to not gossip, to be seen as someone that works hard and not hard, to be seen, to not get on, to not be someone that gossips. If you gossip about someone or you start forming negative opinions about partners and other people, they will see it in your interactions with them. So you need to avoid that. You need to be careful about listening to negative things and having that impact how you feel about your job. Your job is a gift. It's something that you need to take positively. And the other thing to remember too is anytime you're working somewhere, if you're working, it really doesn't matter the city that you're in. Even if you're in New York, you will have a contact, and those people, you'll come across with them throughout your entire career, and they will say either positive things about you or neutral things or even bad things about you. So your reputation at where you start and any place you work, even if it's not a good firm, will follow you throughout your career. So you need to do the absolute best you can. So we'll take a quick break just for like a minute or two, and then when I come back, I will take questions. Thank you. Hi. So we'll go to questions. Let me get questions here. Wow, there's a lot of questions. Someone asked a question, will you send notes about, let me just make sure I'm sharing my screen. About the webinar. Yes, I will send after the webinar, I'll send everyone the PowerPoint, but I'll also send the transcript of the webinar, as well as a summary of what we talked about, because I did go off the topic a little bit in the webinar, so I will do that. I recently transitioned from a mid-sized regional firm to a large AmLaw 15 firm, and while I expected a culture shift, I'm struggling how to integrate myself into existing client teams without stepping on toes. How do I navigate these unspoken territorial dynamics while showing initiative and making myself indispensable early on? So that's a really good point. So how do you make yourself indispensable? Typically, you will just do the work you're assigned the absolute best you can, and then that's really it. Anytime someone transitions from a mid-sized firm to a larger firm, you have to realize that typically there's going to be a different quality of work, different types of work, and different ways that you're expected to do the work. Large law firms typically will be working on behalf of the largest clients. The largest clients will typically have general counsels and so forth, and the general counsels have typically worked at large law firms before. So the quality of work, meaning the level of detail and how much work you put in, and then how good the work is that you're turning out, will often be much different in larger firms and in smaller firms. So you need to really very quickly kind of learn that. You can often learn things by going into a lot of large firms will have we'll have files where you can examine how certain things were done in the past, but you need to be very, very careful. A lot of times people will move from mid-sized firms to large law firms and won't do well for that reason. Okay, this next question. I'm a Black woman attorney and I've faced racial discrimination every place I've worked. My presence intimidating my white colleagues. How do I address that and maintain a reasonable level of sanity? So it's actually interesting. That's a good question. I wrote probably the only book about law firm, how things like race and so forth play out at different firms. People will, experience discrimination. People that are Black can discriminate. People that are gay, people that are of different types of backgrounds can experience discrimination. So, typically, there are, from what I've seen, it is difficult. Often being an African American working in firms that are all white or mainly white, it's that because there may be, you may not feel included in different groups. People may have preconceptions about the type of work you'll do, and so it can be very hard. And a lot of times when I see resumes of African American people, they will often drop out of large law firms very, very quickly or more quickly than they should. They will often, jump around between firms maybe when they shouldn't. And so, I'm not saying that, this is something that people that are African American are doing wrong. I'm saying that a lot of times that will happen because they feel like they're unable to get the best work, and they're unhappy, and they're not feeling included in the culture. So what I recommend to people, different people come from different types of backgrounds. And what I recommend doing is just any place you go, doing the absolute best work you can for the people that are giving you work. Try not to, look for sign, try not to feel like you're being discriminated against, even if you may be. Try to just integrate yourself into the culture by doing the best work you possibly can and getting a reputation for that. Because if you work hard and you're doing good work, then people are going to give you repeat work. And if you try to get close to people that are doing well, even if they're white, you kind of try to watch what they see. So again, it's very, very difficult for people a lot of times to integrate into firms. It's not just for people that are African Americans, from people from different backgrounds. I mean, sometimes, you may be from a lower class background and working with attorneys that are upper middle class, and that can have problems. Sometimes you may not be from the same area of the country, and people that are from smaller markets in the South typically are very clannish compared to, when they bring in people from the outside. So, to maintain your sanity, just think about yourself as a product. And as a product, your goal is really to produce the best possible work. And when you get involved in worrying so much about discrimination and so forth, it can set you back, even if it's happening. So just do the best possible work you can. Try not to get involved or get upset about things that maybe when you see things like that, be someone that seems like you're trusted and someone that's not going to make problems, and then kind of leave it at that. Because everybody, when they go into a firm, is really evaluated by being a product, like how good is the work you're doing, how are you being seen as a product, are you working the same hours, are you doing the best work, and ultimately the quality of your work and how hard you work is really the most important thing. And so learning, not making mistakes, working long hours, playing the game the same way the people that are successful are doing. And everybody, it doesn't matter what your background is. If you figure those things out, you'll do well, because people, even though they may discriminate, do not want to be thought of as people that are discriminating against people. They want people to do well. And so I just kind of keep that in mind. See here. Thanks, by the way, for all these questions. These are great questions. Let's see here. I'm working for a small firm in an area. If I'm working for a small law firm in an area like personal injury or landlord tenant, how much should I worry about possible ethical issues taking place at the firm? I've bounced around at different firms, like the spotty work history or horror stories you talk about, and seen that a lot of them do things that scare me. How much should a young attorney worry about firms doing unethical things? I'm not sure if I'm being hypervigilant, paranoid about the things that almost every small one does. Yeah, so most law firms, to some extent, will do things that you may view as ethically wrong. It could be overbilling clients. It could be, all sorts of things. And really, as an attorney, you need to be very careful about questioning that and of creating problems. If someone's doing something that, for example, is illegal, then it's in your best interest to leave. But in general, you need to kind of understand what the firm is doing. You need to try to be, do things ethically, but at the same time, you need to, often law firms for their clients will bend rules and do all sorts of things, and that's kind of the job as an attorney. And I hate to say it, but you need to kind of play along with those games to the extent that they're not, you're not hurting anybody. You just kind of need to figure out, what these ethical issues are. I mean, large law firms will often drastically overwork work matters and bill their clients way more than they have to. Is that ethical or not? I guess it's it's up to someone judging that. Law firms will often bend the rules to get the results that other clients want. Law firms will often also overbill clients for things that they may not have done. But your goal really is not to, for example, someone may have all these forms that they use and they can knock something out like an hour and a half, and then they'll bill the client for 10 hours, which would be if they had to do the forms from scratch. Law firms will do things like that all the time. When you're seeing these things, you need to basically be seen as part of the tribe and to not create a lot of problems about it. If certain people are doing things that aren't ethical, you can avoid them. But in general, you need to learn how to kind of play by the firm's rules and be very, very careful, because if you're not, then you'll be seen as someone that's not trusted and someone that the law firm will push out. That's just how it works. One of the things I notice a lot is sometimes a lot of times attorneys will go in house, and then when they go in house, they will be very, they won't help the company bend rules. They'll be very kind of literal about things and not do things to help the company. And in general, most law firms and most attorneys, your job is to bend rules and to try to get the best result you can for your client, even if that doesn't sound like the best thing. But that's kind of the job of an attorney, is to figure out how to bend rules and do things the way that law firms want. And a lot of law firms will overbill clients. A lot of law firms will do things like not give over certain documents in discovery that they should, and that would be unethical not to. Law firms will just do all sorts of different things, and you need to find a place where you're comfortable. But at the same time, if you make issue of those things when you're at a firm, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. Next question. During my last search, I relied mostly on job boards that ended up in a firm that looked great on paper, but turned out to be a poor cultural fit. Based on what you said in the webinar about understanding firm dynamics before joining, would working with a recruiter help me uncover those behind the scenes issues that job descriptions never reveal? To some extent, a recruiter can help you, but like at BCG, like we work with over like 30,000 firms. So you never really will know the culture of a firm or what it's like until you actually join there. Each practice area will have different cultures. So you may read about a firm having decent hours, but then join a practice area where the hours are crazy. You just really, a lot of times, can't understand the culture until you join there. So your goal really is with any firm is to try to, integrate with the culture to the extent you can. If you can't, then obviously, you need to leave. But there's really a lot of times no way to understand firm dynamics before you're joining. One of the things you can often do is when you're interviewing, if you interview with associates, you can ask, am I replacing anybody? Where's that person going, and so forth. So understanding that. When I get into law firms and I just go there as a recruiter, I often get a sense of the culture very, very quickly. Like, are doors closed? How do people treat me? Are they formal? Are they informal? Do people seem happy? Are people talking in the halls? Or does everything seem very quiet? Are people in the office? Are people not in the office? How do people interact with me? So sometimes you'll interview with a firm and they will be very friendly with you and nice to you. And other times you'll interview with a firm and everything will seem very formal and people won't connect with you. I had one instance where there was a woman that she's a very strong international trade attorney in New York, and she got a job with this one firm, and they interviewed her twice. She interviewed with partners. The interactions were just kind of very businesslike, and then she got an offer from the firm, and the offer actually paid, I think, probably $90,000 more than she was making. But then when the offer was made, it was made just through like a human resources person and not any of the partners that she spoke to. And then she had questions about the offer and wanted to talk to a partner there, and everything just kept going through this human resource. And they said, no, you can't talk to the partners, they're busy. And so she ended up turning down the offer because she felt that, and it was probably the best choice, a good choice, because she felt that if the culture was, such that I couldn't even ask questions of partners there after getting an offer, that wasn't a place, that I wanted to join. Okay, let's see here. It's about using recruiters. I'm nervous about sharing my job search with recruiters because I've had mixed experience in the past. Some ghost to me or push to relevant roles. How do I know when a recruiter is actually aligned with my long-term goals versus just trying to fill a slot? How do they differ from anonymous job boards in that regard? Okay, so recruiters a lot of times there's different types of recruiters. BCG is kind of a different type of recruiter, but I'll explain to you how most recruiters work. So most recruiters will get a job, and then they try to reach out and find people that match that job. Maybe they'll have two jobs. If you don't get any interviews, then because they're salesmen a lot of times, and a salesman basically wants to work with people that they can sell, they will figure that you're not sellable or you're not sellable to what they have, and they will ghost you and you'll stop hearing about them. Sometimes they will push you into irrelevant roles if you're the only candidate they have. You should not allow yourself to be pushed into long-term things. But the thing to remember about recruiters, I mean, there's a couple things to remember, but the one thing is that they will have relationships with certain firms, but they cannot get a firm to hire you. So I've had candidates that I've worked with that were good candidates, and I worked with them for several firms, and no one was interested in them, and they blamed me. But in reality, those attorneys are products, and because they're products, law firms will either be interested in that product or not. And so you need to just kind of look at things in that way, like because are the law firms interested in me based on me being a product? So a recruiter is just someone that's marketing a product. And if they can't get any traction with that, a lot of times they will stop working with you. At BCG, we're a placement firm. So as a placement firm, what we do is we will present you to jobs, but then we'll always find firms that could be interested in you, even though they don't have any openings. And so we can introduce you to kind of a much wider variety of places where you could work than if you were just applying to a few firms through recruiters. So recruiters are good. And, the different types of recruiters will try to fill jobs. At BCG, we try to market someone to as many possible places that they could work. So if you're applying to a job on a job board, you may, like if you're in a city like Minneapolis, there may be one or two jobs, but in reality, there might be over 100 firms that are, decent in your practice area you could potentially work for. So people will do, recruiters can do different things depending on the candidate. And we're a placement firm, so we'll always try to find firms that are good for you. Not everybody should be using recruiters. In general, the rule that I have when I look at candidates is the candidate really needs to be strong in one practice area. So if your resume talks about one thing, like say you're a personal injury attorney and you do a certain type of personal injury, that's good. If you're a insurance defense attorney, but you also do intellectual property, well, most firms are going to be hiring you to do one or the other. So your resume needs to talk about that in one way. But pretty much every attorney, like it doesn't matter who you are, if you're strong in one practice area, there are people that will hire you, whether it's in response to a job or whether or not you're just kind of marketing yourself to marketing yourself to firms that don't have openings, which in reality is the most effective way to get a job. If I'm working for a large firm, do I need to be reachable at all times, even during vacations as it becomes an intern? Yes, you need to be reachable at all times. So you should always be checking your email on the weekends. You should be reachable, and even when you become senior, because that's kind of the job. Attorneys need to be reachable. It's just how it works, and if you're not, that obviously create issues for you. Let's see here. After attending your webinar, I realized that some of my past failures in the law firm roles were due to not understanding how the firm's unspoken expectations early on. When I interview for my next position, what are some subtle but telling questions I can ask that will give me real insights into how the culture is and how success is measured? So the best question to ask when you're interviewing with a firm is, what would it take, for me for the first 30, 60, 90 days to do, exceptionally well here, or to be the best person you've ever hired for this role and so forth. So that will give you, if you ask those sorts of questions, that will give you a very good insight into kind of the expectations of where you're joining. So some firms may, be very, very serious and say you have to, be working all these hours. Other firms may give you, other indications, but asking that question, like what would it take for me to be the best associate of whatever you hired in the first 90 days is very, very important, because that question, by the way, is something that's very good to ask, just because it will make the firm think you're going to try very hard there and take everything very seriously. But it's also a good question to ask just because that will tell you a little bit about how success is measured there. Okay, my first in-office legal role after spending several years. I'm in my first office legal job after spending years in a remote role. Social norms and physical expectations are entirely new to me. How important is visibility in the office when I'm trying to integrate a new firm? And what are some specific actions I can take to get noticed in a positive way? So if you join a new firm and you're expected to be in the office, then you have to be in the office, and you have to be there like I said before, supervisors and things are arriving, people you're working for are arriving, you have to be there until they leave. So visibility in the office is extremely important. And it's just something you need to keep in mind when you're working for someone else. Just keep in mind that you're an employee. You're not there for yourself. You're there to meet their expectations. And so being there when you're expected to be and when other people are very positive. The other thing about being in the office too is you'll always you'll learn a lot about the culture, about the people you should be working for, about the people you should be avoiding. People will take time to help you to go over your work with you in a way that they necessarily wouldn't do if you're out of the office. So anytime to be in the office is actually a very positive thing. Every legal job I ever had, by the way, I always made sure that I lived close to the office because I wanted to be able to spend as much time as possible and be able to get there very, very quickly. Let's see here. In the webinar, In the webinar, you talked about learning the firm's culture very, very quickly to avoid early mistakes. I've noticed that partners in my new firm don't give much feedback, and I'm worried I'm missing subtle signs of disapproval. Are there specific behavioral clues I should watch for, and how proactively I should seek feedback without being insecure? Okay, so a lot of times partners and firms will not have a lot of time to give feedback, or they necessarily won't. So you can you should certainly ask for feedback. Typically, if you're getting work again, so people will seek you out, and you may get an assignment for a partner. If that partner asks you to do the same, to work for them again, then you're typically going to doing a good job. The best way to really understand how to do good work there is typically to seek out senior associates and mid-level associates if you're a junior associate, and just kind of ask them for advice about assignments and try to get their input. That's really, in my opinion, the best way of doing things. Partners a lot of times will not have the time to give you feedback. They're concerned about all sorts of other things, and so you typically aren't getting, often the law firms won't get a lot of feedback. So the only way to understand what's required is to talk to more senior people, to do the best you can with other things, and then try to get feedback that way. One second. The next question is, I'm transitioning from government to a private civil litigation firm. What is the best way to shift your mindset from being being oriented performance to being more entrepreneurial? I don't, depending on the firm you're joining, I don't know how important it is to be entrepreneurial. Being entrepreneurial, I guess, would mean getting clients and that sort of thing. But typically, anytime you're going to work for a law firm from the government, there's different sorts of expectations. So the expectations are going to be, you're going to be billing hours. You're going to be, you're going to be bending rules like you might not in the government, and then you're going to be expected to eventually to develop business. But most people that transition from government to private, you need to learn, you need to be very, very careful about billing hours, and you need to learn how to bend rules. That is one of the things that I would say is the most important. And then doing the best possible work you can. It's not always easy to transition in the government. A lot of people, fail. So you need to learn very, very quickly, like what a law firm requires as opposed to the government. It's often going to be more hours, more face time, more, completely different. But you need to figure out kind of what's going on. Let's see here. Any good questions? That'd be helpful. Okay. Let me just see here. I'm a lateral associate in each practice area, and most of the work seems to flow through senior attorneys or protecting the relationships. How can I demonstrate value when I'm not necessarily generating business yet? The best way to demonstrate value is to work as many hours as you can on the matters that you're given, not necessarily overbill, but to work very hard to do very, very good work for those partners, to do exceptional work, like the best possible work you can, meaning not missing details and that sort of thing, and just really kind of applying yourself. You don't have to worry when you're a junior or even mid-level associate about generating business. You just need to do the best possible work you can. Partners in any firm or senior attorneys are your clients. So if they're your clients, it means you treat them like a client with the same sort of respect you would treat a client, and also making sure that you're working as hard as you possibly can. Okay, let me see. Okay, next question. I'm not an attorney, but I want to join law firms for IP roles like patent engineer, technology specialist. I have a strong research background to fulfill the needs of these roles. What is your advice about how to get into this field for the first job? So there are the patent agents and so forth. We actually place them in law firms. If you're trying to get into those roles in a law firm, you typically, the best thing to do is to be admitted to the patent bar. There are technical specialists inside of law firms, but in general, law firms will hire patent agents and not IP specialists. So I think it's very, very difficult to get a job as a IP or technology specialist in most firms, unless you're like a patent agent. So I recommend, if that's something you're trying to do, you become a patent agent. Okay, well, thanks everyone for being on this webinar. I hope this material was helpful. I will make sure I send a transcript of the webinar to everyone, as well as PowerPoint, and I will see everyone next week. Thank you.